Gino and Waza. I welcome GM from Arche Protocol.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, thank you for showing up. Can you introduce our audience into your person and what led you into crypto and especially to the movement ecosystem?
Yeah, definitely. So my name is GM or Guilherme Maia, that's the GM. I've been in crypto for more than 6 years. I came acquaintance with crypto. I was still on my master, so my background is actually from the a legal background, and it was the ransomware attack that occurred in 2017, prior to the bull market of 2017. So I got that part a little bit lucky. Um, and I thought, like, why are the ransomware people asking for 100 Bitcoin? That's like what, 100 euro. So I thought instantly, and then just out of curiosity, I checked the price of Bitcoin. It was like 1.5k, and I was completely astonished. Like I really didn't understand why. And therefore, that's how I started going down the rabbit hole, trying to understand why did Bitcoin like have a value of 1.5k, what was behind it, and why would it make any sense for even if to be priced over than €1 or $1. So that's how my crypto journey started. Even in my master, so it's a tax law master. My thesis was about the crypto asset taxation and regulation in Portugal, or the lack of, actually, back in 2018. And then I was just um, lucky enough to find an advisory firm that was starting from, once again, regulatory perspective in Malta, where I joined while I was still studying, and then worked there for more than 5 years. This regulatory firm that I worked alongside big names, being from exchanges, to give legal opinions pertaining to tokens. So whenever they wanted to be listed, they usually require this legal opinion to understand if the token is a financial instrument or electronic money, and if it was one of these, they potentially couldn't list it because of regulatory authorizations or licenses that they were required. And more, um, like in the last 2 years, we were more focused on actually advising on chain and big decentralized protocols, and make sure that they were fully compliant with MiCA. So MiCA is the Market in Crypto Assets regulation that came into force this year. So it was a little bit more technical, more on detail, rather than just being the normal legal stuff. On that part, I'm also a Solidity developer. So I actually was very interested. I always wanted to build something, and whenever I had free time, I dedicated myself on trying to understand and program a little bit of Solidity. And I'm currently as well a university lecturer here in Portugal. Um, about, once again, blockchain, crypto assets, and a bit more specific about the crypto regulation in general. So I would say that's mainly my background, mostly or fully focused on crypto. And I came across movement, I would say, in like one of my journeys within the SUI ecosystem. So I'm more familiar with the SUI ecosystem rather than Aptos. Um, but in the SUI ecosystem, there was like some discussions pertaining to this new ecosystem that was coming up. I came across movement. To be honest, I was not paying that much attention in the beginning, but then I think the path just crossed, or the stars just aligned, and I was invited to spearhead the project, which is Arche Protocol. So even though I heard before Move, I was not really into Move, and then late this summer, I was actually invited to develop this protocol and to become more familiar, obviously, with the movement ecosystem as a whole.
Amazing, and I think quite unique combination you have because most like from the tax and legal guys are maybe not that much into technical side and the other way around as well. So pretty nice combination you have at this moment. And yeah, maybe you can also elaborate a little bit more how you came to launch or found Arche. I mean, it's a
Yeah,
quite unique protocol, I think. So
definitely. So I've been doing my years as an advisor. I've worked a lot with some major protocols that are on purely on chain CDP stablecoin modules. So CDP is debt positions, or how we more traditional know is like over collateral positions, where you deposit this sort of collateral, and then you can borrow against it. And what you borrow, it's not another asset, but rather a stablecoin. Usually, obviously, these were new sort, I would say, like business plans / new sort of protocol, especially MakerDAO in the early days, and then obviously a lot of different forks and other protocols that adapted or copied or forked the same system. Therefore, I was very familiar with this sort of model, and it was something that I was highly interested on, because I think there is a huge value, and I think unfortunately most people in crypto take it for granted, like the stablecoin system that we currently have with like USDT and USDC, but sometimes they are not that familiar with the potential third-party risks that are involved with holding such tokens as, for example, USDC has a very well and famous function which allows to freeze all. So if one day they decide to freeze your account, they can easily allow you not to transfer USDC anymore, just out of whim. And then DAI, or back in the day like MakerDAO, and DAI now called Sky, try to prove or give a solution, which was create a stablecoin that is fully decentralized to the point where they can't block at any time or any transaction, and they can't actually stop the minting or the burning process, as it's fully decentralized, no proxy, no upgradability. It is what it is when it's deployed on the mainnet. And so this was something that I was very passionate about. Even from a regulatory perspective, it was extremely interesting in terms of, is it like a electronic money institution or not? So there were like a lot of interesting discussions around the stablecoin ecosystem. And so even though I'm very familiar with it, I'm very, once again, passionate about it. And when I got this opportunity of like, look, there is an opportunity here for you to spearhead this project, and this is going to be like a fully on-chain stablecoin, which is a need within the movement ecosystem. And do you want to be part of it? I was like, definitely yes. So I quit my job. It was actually funny. Like in July, I quit my job, and then like in 2 months' time, I joined Arche Protocol, and here I am. So I would say like the reason why I joined is, once again, I'm extremely passionate about DeFi. I always wanted to be a builder, and I think now it was the perfect opportunity for me to join and start building something on my own as well.
Nice, really, really amazing story. Especially, yeah, seeing someone from Europe also working on the MiCA, like the regulation on crypto assets in Europe. I think that's also quite unique on a world scale. Yeah, so really interesting profile you have, and
Thank you.
as well. Yeah, I think Arche is also quite an unique project in the ecosystem, and yeah, as you already said, stables are maybe some undervalued product, because you can't like have those crazy gains which you have like on a meme coin or another token, but still they are very essential for DeFi especially. And yeah, maybe you can elaborate a little bit more for us, like what is the Arche all about, and what Arche's product itself is. I mean, is it like the stablecoin itself, or is it like more services attached to this? Maybe you can go a little bit deeper on this.
Definitely. So our strategy is a bit, I would say, like threefold. Our go-to-market strategy, which is more like I would say the requirement even almost for MovementLabs, and obviously all these builders are doing, is we need to go to market as soon as the mainnet allows the builders to deploy on chain. And therefore, what we're currently focused on, and you can even test Arche Protocol in the testnet now, was to create a product that was going to be live like in 2 to 3 weeks. So we achieved this. Everything's according to plan. We're just doing the last Python integration. Python, for the people or the listeners that are not familiar with, is an Oracle, decentralized Oracle provider, which for our protocol is extremely important because it gives the price feed of the Move token. Maybe I got a little bit ahead of myself. Sorry. Let me start from the beginning. Like, what is Arche, and then why this is so important. So, as I did like the brief introduction a couple of minutes before, Arche is mainly focused on being on-chain stablecoin protocol. What does this mean? Is that you, as the holder of Move, for example, want to have some sort of stable exposure to a stablecoin, and as we are all believers that Move will potentially do 3 to 4 times in the near future, you don't really want to sell your assets, even though you may require some liquidity for your personal life or even for other investment opportunities that may come up. So what the Arche protocol allows you to do is basically use Move as a collateral. So you deposit Move in our protocol, and you can have like a credit line against your collateral. So for example, you have 100 euros or 1,000 euros or dollars, worth of Move, and you can potentially borrow, for example, $500 worth of MST, the Move OST, which is pegged 1-to-1 with the dollar. And therefore, now you have this 500 credit line, which you can use to switch or to trade against other stablecoins, or to invest, for example, in other ecosystem opportunities within, for example, even the movement ecosystem. So it's a great way for you to naturally leverage, even though I don't really like to leverage, but whenever it's a credit, it's always leverage. But for you to have some sort of natural leverage to increase your exposure to the ecosystem. So these, I would say, like our version 0.5, our go-to-market strategy is to have like this product live, and we already have it, and it's completely ready to be deployed. So we only have one collateral type, which is Move, and you can borrow against it, paying obviously an interest rate over the borrow. In the future, we want to scale to offer other collateral types, for example, liquid staking tokens, which are already being developed by, I do believe, 2 or 3 protocols within the movement ecosystem, which will allow you to do something extremely interesting, right? So your collateral, instead of having a 0% API, will actually give you the yield that's being generated by the validators, let's assume 2 to 5% on a yearly base, and you can borrow against these yield-bearing instruments while asking for credit, which means that you potentially will be like breaking even the interest that is being paid in the Move native token against what you have to borrow, or what you pay against the borrowing, doing like a net zero cost for you to have this natural exposure or leverage within the protocol. So that's our like second step. We want to allow liquid staking tokens and other potential tokens from the movement ecosystem to be used as collateral to borrow against MST. Eventually, in the future, what we're considering is maybe doing like a delta neutral position solution, which is similar to Ethena. I'm not sure if people are very familiar with that process, but it's a bit complex for me to explain in our podcast. So if you're interested, please just check it in a docs. But that will depend in a lot of different circumstances, a little bit outside of our control, such as market maturity, if there are like perp instruments on chain, purely on chain, and if obviously we'll have the structure to be able to scale to that sort of product. But it's something obviously that we have in the pipeline for sure. Now, answering the second question, how is Arche or MoveOST relevant to the DeFi ecosystem, is because we are going to be here from day zero, right? So people realize how important it is to have a stablecoin in any sort of form, right? We were just discussing that USDC and USDT, people take it as a grant, as granted, and they maybe forget the vulnerabilities that they have as a third-party risk. But what people want is a stable coin within certain ecosystems. And that's why we're trying to bring like a purely on-chain solution that will allow you to integrate with major, and we have already closed some major partnerships with a lot of protocols within the ecosystem to be the stable coin of movement. And we're starting from here. Obviously, USDT and USDC are going to be breached, I would say, in the near future. But we want obviously to conquer the market, have something that is validated, is even encouraged by the MovementLabs themselves, and we want to provide that sort of on-chain solution for most people that, once again, want to have exposure to Move while still having exposure to a stable asset such as MST.
Amazing. Yeah, I think most people are like familiar to USDT and USDC. Although I think maybe most don't like understand like the mechanics are behind it. And you already mentioned for Arche it's probably a synthetic one, right? So it's not gonna be like for USDC or USDT that it's gonna be like let's say more or less one-to-one collateral behind.
Correct.
Is that something you didn't really think about, or is it because of like regulation type, or I don't know, why did you choose to go on a synthetic one?
Yeah. Okay. So there are two reasons. One's definitely like the regulation and the licensing process for you to be electronic money institution. So it's an institution that is allowed to issue this sort of stable coins or centralized stable coins is extremely tough and expensive. And at the same time, honestly, it's not a market that you can compete with nowadays. So you have USDT and you have USDC. You have the one from Binance FN USD that they now changed the name as well, which are huge institutions with huge of liquidity backing them, and they are always trying to tackle once again the centralized market of stablecoins. They want to become the stablecoin, and therefore for you to try to have a centralized approach against these sort of institutions, it's potentially like I would say shooting yourself in the foot. It will be way too expensive. You'll have to pay way to in marketing, and you are not differentiating yourself from any of these institutions, right? So that brings us once again to what aligns to me personally in terms of philosophy. So the ethos of decentralization, try to bring the best product purely decentralized without any control by us as our protocol, and once again facilitating this access to the people, right? It's much easier for us to create a protocol where the stability and the pegging is maintained by the collateral value, while this collateral is actually increasing the overall evaluation of the ecosystem as a whole, right? Once again, you can use your move, and we're incentivizing you to have move, deposit move with us, and now you have exposure to a stablecoin without having to sell move to have like that type of exposure to a stablecoin. So I think it's a win-win situation. Once again, fully decentralized. It doesn't cater for the regulation, plus trying to go against these big institutions, and at the same time is much more ecosystem friendly. People, obviously, we will over the next months, I'm going to create more content about like what is this like over collateralized debt positions, how do they work, so people are a bit more familiarized and try to understand like this actually makes much more sense than USDT and USDC, and see why there is a lot of value to be captured, while once again maintaining and trying to push for the ecosystem and be a builder within the ecosystem, which I think is fundamental at this stage.
Yeah, definitely. And as you said, the user base usually gets smarter with time, so they can better understand what the product behind is. Maybe at that point, because we had stable coins in the focus some years ago, for example, with the Luna crash and so on. Is that something? I mean, of course, it's something you're like looking at and try to tackle the risk. And I don't know if you can go into that without going into technical stuff and losing people.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Do you have something like an easy explanation how you try to balance out those risks?
Yes, sure. So even though they can be called algorithmic stablecoins, so as you mentioned, since UST in Luna, algorithmic stablecoins have this sort of bad connotation. What algorithmic stablecoin really means is that it's based on the smart contract or on the protocol, right? So, for example, DAI from MakerDAO, Ethereum, it's still an algorithmic stablecoin.
Yeah.
The major difference, I would say, that is a very important for people to understand is the collateral type, right? In our protocol, it's exogenous, which means we are not having our own token. For example, Arche, eventually it will exist, our governance token. We will not allow it to exist as collateral within our platform, and we are not going to borrow against it. That is the major difference that happened with Luna. Luna was endogenous, which means Anchor, which was the name of the stablecoin protocol, which allowed you to get like 20% API, amongst other technicalities, was against Luna itself. And it was not even kind of collateral, but you could potentially even burn Luna to mint UST, and then Anchor was like this market maker to maintain the price of UST against Luna. So it's a bit complex to explain in a very high level, but I think that's the most important thing that people need to understand. The type of collateral is a huge consideration to have in terms of risk. If you're using your own asset that you created to use as collateral to mint a stable coin against it, then it potentially creates like a very centralized risk, right? If my token, which is like a regular token with low liquidity, let's call it, has some sort of crash, it can burn and liquidate a lot of people. Luna was worse because Luna was crashing, and what was worse, as people with UST, as it was depegging, they were converting UST to Luna, so it was not a swap, it was actually burning UST and minting new Luna. So this is like the weird algorithmic part of Luna UST, and therefore they were creating a lot of sell pressure in Luna while that was collapsing, and that's how we see like this spiral of constantly selling. In this case, we are obviously intrinsically linked with Move, but we don't have any sort of control of Move, right? Like as MakerDAO has no any sort of control against Ether. It's exogenous to us. Obviously, if Move for some reason has a huge problem, Anchor will have Arche Protocol will have a huge problem. But it's not related to Arche on its own. It's always depend on the ecosystem we are building. But if obviously Move has a problem, then the movement ecosystem as a whole will have a problem. We are somehow separated and like I mean, I don't really like this. It's a little bit weird, but we are decentralized. Let's call it this way. From the collateral type, even though obviously we are heavily dependent on the movement ecosystem as a whole. And that I would say is the main difference, and that's why how we are catering for risk. Our collateral will be governance approach, and even those will be native tokens or liquid staking tokens. So they are still like tokens that are collateralized or used for validation purposes, and therefore they are still heavily linked with Move, a little bit more risky, but that's up to the user to decide if they want to use LST or if they want to use Move directly.
Okay, cool. So yeah, on the product side, I would have two further questions. One would be, I mean, you already mentioned you're in Europe. Is maybe something you're looking also into something like a stable euro coin? Is it something like a possibility, which might be even maybe interesting for I don't know, banks or other institutionals? And the other question, which would be maybe adopting a little bit to your last part, is how you guys like earn money, or how you can like sustain your business case more or less.
Definitely. So the first question is a great question. It's actually rather easy for me to discard like a Move euro immediately for I would say three main reasons. The first one is there is no market fit whatsoever for it. So the crypto market is 95%, let's say it. I mean, it was a random number, but over 90% for sure, dollar based. And even
Yeah.
though there are some institutions creating like even Circle, so USDC, they are creating Euro C. There are very few centralized exchanges or projects in the EU, unfortunately. So our market is very small. The regulation is extremely demanding for startups, and therefore they're actually killing innovation. And therefore there is no need for a Euro C by any means. And everyone in Europe that I know, they are using dollars as their stable reference against any sort of trading or any sort of asset. So that's the first reason. I mean, I would think that there is no market fit whatsoever for other currency apart from the USD. Sorry. That takes us to the second point in terms of regulation, which is if you're minting euro or the stable coin against euro, regardless of where you're incorporated at or what sort of issuance mechanism you have, MiCA will still cater for you. So they will still try to go after you in terms of regulations. Like, look, if you're minting euro, euro, let's imagine this case, outside of the EU, and you have no connections. Actually, I mean, in Portugal, so it's a bit more complex, but you don't have any sort of ties directly to the EU. We don't really care. MiCA still apply. So once again, another reason for me to not even try to be interested in minting this Euro C token. And the third reason is I'm not really looking for any sort of exposure, or we're not currently looking for sort of exposure from the centralized industry, right? So like banks, even sexes. That's not what we're really focusing on. What we want to focus once again is purely like on chain. Obviously, if liquidity increases and a lot of volume is there, hopefully we'll get to that point. Eventually, we will try to target sexes, but at this moment, we want to scale within movement, scale within the Move language as well. And after we cater for all the market and we see that like our stablecoin is a stablecoin, if there is interest from the other side, then we discuss. But it will probably not be pushed from our side, actually.
Okay. So not like the main business case, which was, I think, the second question, how you guys can like survive, because I think that's like kind of an important question if people put their amounts into a stablecoin, but the stablecoin doesn't exist because the project was dying. Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah.
So, from a business plan perspective or revenue module, to be quite honest, stablecoins are probably the ones that do not rely on any sort of pumponomics metrics, right? So even though we're going to create Arche, which once again is our governance token, we don't really need it for the business to be profitable. The reason why is that is actually a threefold reason. Once again, it's always threefold. The first one is that you get a lot of revenue from the borrowing interest that the users need to pay. So the current market or like industry standard is 5.25% on the borrowing, and this gives like a lot of ongoing revenue for the treasury, and obviously the treasury has bills to pay. On the second note is obviously if we're going to have our own, and we are currently discussing this, for example, running our own validator within the validator set of movement, we can actually create another revenue source, which is coming from the validation services, and we can even decrease the borrowing utilization rate for the user while sacrificing maybe 1 to 2% of the borrowing API. We can get maybe 2 to 5% on the validator stake, and we have another source of revenue that is being created directly from our protocol. Then obviously the delta neutral positions, the Athena-based model can provide much more revenue, but that's not something that we're focusing on the short midterm for now. But this borrowing fee, if we can cater, and that's what we're currently aiming in the first, I would say, like, let's imagine 6 months, to have 20 million of MST being minted over the course of a year, that will give us around 1 million of revenue, which is more than sufficient at an early stage of a protocol to have enough runaway to keep obviously the protocol growing and create more incentives for more people to borrow. So we have this line, and this, I mean, say the interest that is being paid is a very traditional sort of business plan, revenue-based business plan, and we once again don't need any sort of pumponomics to make sure that we keep the business alive.
Okay, makes absolutely sense. Yeah, so I would say we covered a lot of your protocol, of your product. What I would be interested in is why movement? Like, why did you choose to launch your product on movement? I mean, you already mentioned some points like your research on SUI and Aptos and so on. But maybe we can also dive a little bit which maybe requirements or which positive aspects movement had to you and why you decided to go on movement and maybe not Solana or any other chain.
Yes, of course. So there are a lot of reasons for why we choose movement. If we start with the technical ones, I do believe the most important one, rather than being like fast finality and all of the modularity that Move offers, it's the security of the Move ecosystem when compared, for example, with Solidity or other languages that we have out there. So as our protocol is a stablecoin protocol, and obviously we achieve to go to higher grounds. For us, it's extremely important security and to make sure that the language that we use is the safest as possible. Even though this once again is a great requirement to have, a great thing to have, there are other reasons much more related to market and infrastructure and even the foundation itself that are worth mentioning. So, market conditions, as we are currently seeing, the time to build is now, or now, I would say, like for the last 1 year, the time to start building was now, and therefore, having this opportunity, once again, I was invited by the Arche Protocol to spearhead the product. It made complete sense to focus like 100% on this Arche. But this was obviously, it is good. We can say the market time is now. But what actually propels me and makes me understand that we can go much farther is either the community and the foundation itself, right? So what we currently saw in Sui and Aptus is that they were not really DeFi driven. So they were much more focused on consumer apps, more like institutional level and trade-off apps, and they were not really focusing on DeFi. For example, in Sui, there was actually this protocol called Bucket Protocol that tried to create a stablecoin, but they didn't have any sort of support from the Sui foundation because they didn't really see the value in an on-chain stablecoin, and therefore they eventually start disappearing, or even though the protocol exists, it doesn't have any relevance nowadays. In Aptos, there are other stablecoins, but once again, there was not their main focus since the beginning, and therefore you don't know any on-chain stablecoin by name from Aptos or Sui. In Movement, it was exactly the reverse, right? So Movement has these over 60 dApps being built from day zero, so already 6 dApps deployed on testnet and ready to be worked, but neither of these 6 dApps were a stablecoin. And the foundation actually saw that there was an opportunity and there was a need for the market to capture at least having a stablecoin since day zero, and therefore I believe that was how Arc was born at the beginning. It was out of a need. The foundation was striving for DeFi, and they really understand that liquidity is a very important metric to have, and a stable metric to have, and therefore they were actually pushing, and they were incentivizing, and they are still incentivize our protocol to build and to be there since day zero. So these amazing feedback that you constantly have, the ability to reach being Rushi, being Cooper, being anyone from MovementLabs, the answer like in a couple of days, this sort of proximity is actually what makes me want to stay and even push further, because I mean it's incredible to have this sort of access to the foundation or to the founders directly in such an early stage. As you asked, for example, why not Solana or the protocols? You will never have this sort of backing, or you will never have this sort of community even in any of those protocols. And once again, Solana is already a little bit too based on centralized stablecoins. So I think once again it was the stars aligning. The tech stack is great. Community is amazing. The founders are pushing for us, and they see the value now what they're proposing, and therefore the time to market is now. And everything was like just for me, it was a no-brainer to join Arc and to develop Arc on Movement.
Yeah, I fully understand the your constellation, and I think the Gorilla Movers or even the MoveCast are in a similar position. Everything aligned quite well, beginning as I said from the foundation, from the movement ecosystem and the community, for of course. Um, so yeah, it makes absolutely sense. And maybe one point, I think you already elaborated a little bit on it, but why didn't you like participate in the Parthenon testnet? I think it's probably because you were quite like late to the party. I mean,
Exactly.
you mentioned something in the summer you quit your job, so I think that was where the Parthenon already was like starting off. So was
Yeah,
that like the reason that you just were late?
definitely. It was definitely that reason. So I believe Arc in the beginning started discussion with Movement July, August. I joined late September, and when I joined, there was nothing there except from a pitch deck, right? So we had to start building, and we did it in 2 months. Our protocol was live on the testnet the day the Parthenon ended. So that was the reason. I even remember texting like, "How can we join the Parthenon?" Like, "Oh, it's going to be over in 4 days." Like, okay. So unfortunately, we were not part of it because obviously we didn't have built. We came a little bit, as you mentioned, late to the party. But now, obviously, we're ready to be part of any community based incentives or any community events that are there. We're trying to be as active as possible, and obviously we want to try to provide, as we were assisted by the foundation itself, we want to assist any protocol that requires liquidity or some sort of integration as best as we can.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, maybe at that point I can ask how the community can like best support you guys. Do you have like social media accounts, Discords, where people can join and support you?
Definitely. So currently we only have Twitter. So we are trying to build our community among Twitter. And as soon as we grow Twitter, we're going to have a Discord channel. But definitely we want to do it especially for the governance slash collateral proposals that we may have. But what I would really appreciate, if it is possible, is for people to actually try our protocol. The front end is just having some like minor tweaks now, but it should be very close to finish. And if you have any sort of feedback, if you, for example, as you mentioned, probably the community is not that familiar with on-chain stablecoins, and therefore that's the best user for us. They're like the new users. That's what we want to attract. And if there's something that is not clear, please feel free to reach out to me. Say like, look, what is LTV, for example? It's something that is not explained, and I know that I still need to have like a tooltip to have there. But I want the new users that don't really understand what LTV is, what is max borrowing, what is liquidation issues. If it's not clear by any means, please let me know, because as I mentioned, I'm here 6 years. I work with a lot of DeFi protocols. I'm very familiar with these terms, and sometimes for me, it's a given. And it's very hard for me to go through a lens of a new user that really wants to have exposure to the protocol, and then he just doesn't have exposure because he doesn't understand what's going on. So if you can test it out, point out bugs, just have questions or any sort of feedback, being negative or positive, I would really appreciate it, because once again, we're building this for movement.
Okay, yeah, makes absolutely sense, and we're gonna try maybe also from the Gorilla side to push this feedback circle to you guys.
That's
And
amazing.
yeah, one last question on the movement topic. So as I understood, you will probably be live from day one on Mainnet, right?
Okay, so here we are just dependent, unfortunately, of PIT. So PIT, once again, is this decentralized oracle, which gives us the price feed of Move. We were having some integration issues during the testnet, and they took like 1 or 2 weeks to actually figure it out. So we are not really sure if they're going to be live from day one, or if they're already integrating in the mainnet, and that's the only variable that we do not control, unfortunately. But if it's
Okay.
not in day one, like
Yeah.
first 2 week, almost sure, maximum I hope 2 weeks. Otherwise, we'll build our own Oracle system, even though it's not recommended by any means. But we want to go as live as soon as possible. We have everything ready. We're just dependent on the Oracle system, which is crucial for our operations.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, maybe even if it's not day one, it's probably still in the very beginning of movement.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Uh, and there is a
amazing.
bit of alpha. We're going to have a point system. I'm not sure if the listeners know what the point system is. We're obviously going to have this Arc protocol, Arc token being TG'd maybe for maybe max 5 months after the mainnet is launched. But in between, we want to incentivize our users to borrow MST and try to go through, for example, our strategic partners such as like Canopy, Echelon, Meridian, like all of these participants within the mainnet. We are going to give points for them if they use or borrow or deposit in any of these protocols. We're going to give points, which then obviously will be an allocation of an airdrop whenever the TG event occurs. When the TG event occurs, the liquidity incentives are still there, but they will be directly like airdrops of the token. But in between, we're going to create a point system. We're still discussing with our partners the best possible solution and the best point system that obviously will be fair for the community. So we are not going to rug with the different seasons and anything
Yeah, yeah.
like that. It's just like 3 to 4 months before we launch our token. We're trying to come up with like the best possible solution for the users as well. So there will be incentives for you to use MST as well.
Perfect. So I think the communities love alpha alerts. So yeah, cool. So yeah, to bring our session to the end, I would like, because you are really like on the base of the DeFi layer, I would like to ask you what is your personal or like the project's view and vision on DeFi itself, and maybe how DeFi could change our daily lives in the broader society, or maybe like the Move society.
Okay,
Yeah, that would be
definitely.
interesting.
So I think especially for retail users, and then when I mean retail users, I mean I think up to 10 million we're still retail, is that there are a lot of great opportunities in terms of yield. And this sort of yield or potential return, without even going for panzonomics by any means, but actually real yield that you can capture between 20 to 30%, where you don't have any sort of, I would say, like possibility in any centralized exchange unless you're in the bull market. And as you can see now, actually Binance is offering this sort of incentivization for their stablecoin. But in general, it's very hard for you to find either in traditional finance or centralized crypto finance, let's call it this way, this sort of great opportunities and yield opportunities. This is like, for me, the number one use case of DeFi is bringing new opportunities for the people without having this intermediary catching up, like the spread basis, like the banks, right? Where you get 1% maybe over a deposit, and they charge you 7 to 8% when you request to borrow, and they earn the 6% difference between the 1 and the 7%. Here, you can actually be the bank, right? So you borrow or you lend and you receive 3%. The other person borrows, it pays 4%. The DeFi protocol only charges the 1%, like their spread, but you're still capturing 3% against 1%. And the person that is borrowing is having 4% against 7 or 8%. And this like gives you the opportunity as a normal person to first have exposure to these sort of opportunities, and at the same time it allows you to be a participant, like say of the normal regular finance, without actually being ripped off by centralized entities. And I think DeFi is very early on this stage. Obviously, there is this new trend coming of the real world assets. To be honest, I'm a little bit skeptical, but I think that's maybe for another discussion. The reason why I'm a bit skeptical about the RWA, but it's still a real use case that you can bring on chain and allow a lot of different people, like the unbanked, people like to call it, right, that don't have access to this in traditional finance, to have exposure to these financial instruments as well. So DeFi, I think it's very important for the shrimp, say for like the small person, because since the liquidity is not that big, it doesn't really attract like the institutional level, at least in the beginning, especially for movement. Ethereum is already a different beast on its own, but it will allow us to capture a lot of these opportunities with very, I would say, interesting yields without incurring in a lot of risks. And I think that's, for example, what Canopy is currently developing with these vault systems of incentivization for the normal user that is not really DeFi prone, to have easy exposure to a lot of different strategies with like low risk and high yields. And so far, I do believe my opinion is like giving these sort of yields to the community without once again ripping off or an intermediary taking the profits of people that are lending or borrowing.
Amazing, yeah. So really like your vision, and also like including the shrimps, as you said, or the retail investors, which are basically like the huge amount of the community. So yeah, really cool to see you tackling this. Yeah, then from my side, thank you for joining to the MOVECAST, and yeah, hopefully see you soon on Mainnet and possibly on your new communities building up.
Definitely. Thank you very much for inviting me and having me over. It was a pleasure discussing these topics with you.
Yes. Pleasure was on my side. So thank you and